All right, let's talk a little bit about clustering real quick. So just INTP listening, you probably want this information. Types tend to cluster. So for example, creative subtypes, dopamine chasers tend to cluster with other creative subtypes, dopamine chasers. Serotonin, normalizing subtypes tend to cluster and want to be around other normalizing serotonin focused subtypes. Now that's across all 16 types, not just INTPs. But when we come to the dominant and the harmonizing, they tend to be attracted toward each other. There tends to be a desire for dominant subtypes to connect with and be around harmonizing, and harmonizing subtypes to seek out and be around dominant. So we have, if you could think of a quadrant, dominant top left, creative top right, bottom left is harmonizing, bottom left is normalizing. You could almost see a cross diagonal of attraction between the top left, top and the bottom right, but there's not a cross between the top right and the bottom left.
No, yeah.
They kind of avoid each other in a way.
Well, and that's a good thing to visualize too, because building on what you talked about, there's also a capacity to move through these quadrants. And so there is groupings that like each other, but there's also opportunities here for moving into different quadrants ourselves, right? Like we can visit or maybe even take on the characteristics we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. One of the big reasons to understand these careers and how they wire us is that you have a plasticity to you. You have a capacity to visit some of these other traits that are available. And so if you are, say, a creative subtype and you want to move into a more, sort of a streamlined, more assertive place, maybe find a job that you're not hopping from thing to thing, maybe take a little bit more power for yourself, you can move into dominant INTP traits.
Yeah. And
a career choice will require that from you. It doesn't mean it will be effortless, right? It'll get you out of your comfort zone, but the context itself creates an environment in which that is a little more conducive, and it itself is your impetus and motivation to do so. So you also have options here. And if there are some traits that we talked about with some of these subtypes that are very attractive to you, then consider the style of career that will help you move into that space.
Yeah. So again, one of the big takeaways here is that your subtype can indicate the type of career you're attracted to, and it can influence the type of career you choose for yourself. And if you flip it, the type of career you choose will start to wire you to express a certain subtype. So if you want to lean into one of these subtypes we talked about today that you don't typically identify with, pick a career that moves you that direction. That's probably the fastest way to get there, is to choose something in alignment with the energies of that subtype to be able to lean into that aspect.
Well, and I was going to mention, it's hard to go diagonal. So if you're a creative and if you would like to move more normalizing or vice versa, it's easier to move side or up than it is diagonally. So if you're normalizing, maybe consider dominant before creative or harmonizing before creative. It's a little easier to move to the side because you're only working on one function at that point. You're only trying to master the other half of that function. Yeah. So there's also pathways here, and it can help create almost like a personal growth plan of directions you're moving and sort of the next lily pad of the journey.